Welcome back, everyone, to the 21st Century Man podcast. We are all about diving deep into the best advice for men's health and wellness. And, this time around, we've got a really, really important chapter to unpack.
Absolutely. Chapter 7, Preventing Cancer from the 21st Century Man.
Yeah, preventing cancer, that's a big one, right? Nobody wants to hear those words, but we all know, sadly, how many people are affected by this.
It's true. And, it's interesting because this chapter starts out with a pretty sobering statistic. It says half of all cancer deaths in men are actually preventable. It's a lot, right? Yet we still see, hundreds of thousands of men dying prematurely every year because of cancer. And, what's really great about this chapter is it lays out the major culprits, the things that really increase your risk, and more importantly, what we can actually do about it. What can we do to fight back? So we're going to be talking about the biggest risks, clearing up some myths and highlighting the screenings and lifestyle changes that can really make a difference, give you some actual steps you can take.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Knowledge is power.
Right.
But only if we act on it.
Exactly.
So I really like how the authors of this chapter, Dr. Ethan Bash, he's a medical oncologist, and Dr. Judson Brandeis, a urologist, emphasize that cancer isn't just one disease. It's many different diseases. It's like an umbrella term with a whole range of causes.
Absolutely.
So there's no magic bullet here, which, on the one hand can be frustrating, but I also think it's kind of empowering in a way.
I agree.
Because it means there are multiple things we can do to reduce our risk.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to dive into today. We're going to break down what this chapter has to offer and try to give you guys, the listeners, really concrete things you can consider implementing in your lives.
The chapter starts with a quote. It's from Coach Jim Valvano. And it says, "Cancer can take away all my physical abilities. It cannot touch my mind, it cannot touch my heart, and it cannot touch my soul." I mean, wow. Talk about perspective, right? Even when facing something as I guess, overwhelming as cancer, you still have your inner strength.
Right. And the book, it goes on to say something really powerful. It says half of all cancer deaths in men are preventable. That's just wild, isn't it?
It is. It's like, wait, we can actually do something about this. And yet, still over 300,000 American men, they die from cancer each year. It's a gap, right, between what we could be doing and what's actually happening.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's why this deep dive, that's why we're doing this. So, we can kind of bridge that gap and get people the information they need.
Okay, so the book talks about this difference in life expectancy between men and women. Men, around 76 years and women around 81 years. But here's the thing. Men are like 60% more likely to die from cancer, even when they're diagnosed at similar rates as women. So what's going on there?
It's more than just, biological differences, right? It suggests that maybe men aren't taking those preventative steps as seriously, as effectively. But this chapter, it gives you the knowledge. It empowers you to change those statistics.
So what are the things that we can actually change? The book calls out, the usual suspects: tobacco use, eating poorly, obesity, not being active enough, drinking too much alcohol. And get this, these 5 things, they're responsible for 2/3 of all cancers in the U.S.
2/3? That's huge.
That's huge. It's not just a small percentage. It's like the lion's share.
Mm-hmm.
And what that tells you is that the choices you make every day, those have a direct impact. It's empowering, right? You're not just helpless.
And the book, it really puts things in perspective. It says for people under 85, cancer is now the leading cause of death in the United States. It's overtaken cardiovascular disease. It's not just something that happens when you're older anymore. It's affecting everyone.
Yeah. It really highlights how important it is to start thinking about this stuff now, not later. Now, preventative measures, they're not just for extending your life later on. They're for protecting your health now. There's a table in the book, Figure 7.1. It shows, how many new cases and deaths there were from different cancers in 2020. And looking at it, lung cancer, lots of new cases, tragically, and a high number of deaths. Prostate cancer, even more new cases, but fewer deaths. And colon cancer, a lot of both. What does this tell us?
Well, it shows you the impact of prevention and early detection. Like with prostate cancer, you see lots of diagnoses, but people are surviving.
Yeah.
That could be because we have better screening, better treatments. But for lung cancer, the high death rate, that really points to how important prevention is. Because once it's advanced, treatment isn't always as successful. This table is really saying, early detection is good, but preventing it in the first place, that's even better.
That's a great point. And that brings us to the core message of this chapter, right? Primary prevention, along with early diagnosis and therapy, those are the best ways to reduce cancer deaths, a two-pronged approach.
Yeah, it's like you build a strong defense to keep the enemy out. That's prevention. And
Yeah.
then you have a good surveillance system to catch any, intruders early while they're still weak. That's early diagnosis.
The book, it emphasizes something that I think we forget sometimes. It says cancer isn't just one disease. It's a bunch of different diseases, all with different causes.
Yeah.
Infections, lifestyle, environment, they all play a role.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to do this one thing and I'm protected. It's about understanding, the specific risks for each type of cancer. That's where the power is.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these sources of exposure, the book calls them, starting with tobacco. It's blunt and straightforward. Tobacco use is the #1 preventable cause of cancer. 30% of cancer deaths in the U.S., that's because of tobacco. It's 1 in 3 people.
Those are big numbers. And if we could eliminate tobacco use, I mean, think of the impact, right? It would be massive. And it's totally within our control. That's the thing.
The book gives a pretty sobering statistic. It says about half of all smokers will die from something related to tobacco. And they'll lose, on average, 13 years of life.
13 years, that's a lot of time.
Yeah, yeah. Time you could be spending, with family, doing the things you love. It's a serious consequence. The book, it lays it out. It doesn't sugarcoat it.
And smoking, it doesn't just cause lung cancer, although that's a big one.
Yeah.
It increases your risk, by 10 to 30 times compared to a non-smoker. And lung cancer alone, that accounts for almost 25% of all cancer-related deaths. That's a heavy burden.
Yeah, but the risk, it doesn't stop there.
Right.
Smoking also increases the risk of cancers in your mouth, your nasal cavity, your sinuses, even your what's it called, nasopharynx, the back of your throat up by your nose. Then there's the larynx, that's your voice box, esophagus, stomach, colon, pancreas, liver, kidneys, bladder. It's like a whole body attack.
It is, yeah. Those chemicals in tobacco smoke, they travel everywhere. They can damage cells all over. The book does a good job of explaining those connections.
But here's the good news, and the book highlights this. Men who quit smoking, they reduce their risk. Even if they've been smoking for a long time, it's never too late.
Exactly. Quitting, it's the single most impactful thing you can do right now to lower your risk. The book really drives that point home. It's a message of hope.
The chapter then talks about obesity-related cancers. Those account for about 20% of cancer deaths in the U.S. It says we're seeing this trend globally where, there are more people overweight than underweight now. And it estimates that obesity is a factor in 1 out of every 5 cancer cases.
Yeah, and it's not just about, heart health or looking a certain way, excess weight. It affects your hormones, it causes inflammation, and all those things can contribute to cancer.
The book lists a bunch of cancers linked to excess weight. Thyroid cancer, esophageal adenocarcinoma, that's cancer in the esophagus, the tube that connects your mouth to your stomach. Then there's gastric cancer, colorectal, pancreatic, renal, that's kidney, and hepatocellular cancers. Those are in the liver. It's a lot.
And what's interesting is the book explains how, being overweight, it doesn't just, put a strain on your heart. It messes with your body's systems, the hormones, the way it fights inflammation, and all those things can help cancer develop.
There is a silver lining, though.
Yeah.
The book says that losing weight, that's been shown to lower the risk of dying from cancer.
Right. It's not just about feeling better or fitting into your clothes. It's about really impacting, your long-term health, lowering that risk.
Now let's talk about what we eat. Diet. The book says that one-third of all cancer deaths in 2018 were because of cancers of the digestive tract.
Mm-hmm.
The colon, the pancreas, the liver. That's a big percentage.
Yeah. And it makes sense, right? What you eat, it fuels your body, it affects everything. And the book does a good job of explaining how those choices, they really matter.
The book says that eating a lot of red meat, that's linked to colon cancer. About a 17% increase in risk for every 3.5 ounces you eat per day. And processed meat, even worse, at an 18% increase for every 2 ounces per day. And it talks about the reasons, the preservatives, additives, coloring, even how the meat is cooked, like if it's charred.
Right. While they're still figuring out exactly how it all works, the book suggests, being aware of how much red and processed meat you're eating. It's something to keep in mind.
The chapter acknowledges that the whole diet and cancer thing, it's still pretty complex. There's a lot of research being done. But it does point to some evidence that, eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, that can lower your risk. So I guess pile in on the good stuff, That's always a good strategy.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like the foundation of a healthy diet, right?
Yeah.
Fruits, vegetables, whole foods. The research consistently shows that those things, they have a protective effect.
It also says that fiber is good for you. It helps reduce colon cancer risk. So
Mhm.
so more whole grains, more fruits, more veggies, all that good stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Fiber, it's essential for your digestive health, and this just reinforces how important it is.
The book talks about these anti-inflammatory herbs. Curcumin, that's in turmeric, resveratrol, you find that in red wine and berries, and green tea polyphenols. It says they might have some protective effects, but the research in humans, it's still limited. And
Yeah.
and it's really important to remember these things aren't miracle cures. It's about a healthy lifestyle overall combined with, regular checkups with your doctor.
Yeah, it's about a holistic approach, right? It's not just about taking the supplement or that herb, it's about everything working together.
All right, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about infections. The book says that infections like hepatitis B and C and HPV, the human papillomavirus, those are responsible for a surprisingly large number of cancers worldwide, like
Yeah.
17% of all new cases.
Yeah, it's more than you might think, and it's something that people don't always realize. Infections can lead to cancer.
The book talks about the link between HPV and squamous cell cancers. Those are cancers of the head and neck, and also cancers of the anus and genitals, and and almost all cases of cervical cancer. Those are caused by HPV.
Yeah, yeah, that connection is it's very well established. And the HPV vaccine, that's been a huge breakthrough in cancer prevention.
It also talks about hepatitis B and C. Those can lead to liver cancer. HIV can cause blood cancers like adult T-cell leukemia and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And there's H. pylori bacteria that can cause gastrointestinal cancers, including stomach cancer. It's a wide range of infections.
And what's important to understand is how those infections are spread. Because once you know that, you can start to take steps to protect yourself. Most of these viruses, they spread through, body fluids, blood.
And that leads to a really important preventative measure. The book strongly recommends getting vaccinated for hepatitis B and HPV. It says the HPV vaccine that's recommended for kids now to protect them from these cancers later in life. It's a powerful tool.
Absolutely. Vaccinations, they're one of the most effective ways to prevent these infection-related cancers.
The book then talks about exercise, or rather the lack of it. It says that being sedentary, not moving enough, that increases your risk of certain cancers, especially colon and breast cancer. It estimates that about 5% of cancer deaths in the U.S. are because of a lack of physical activity.
Yeah, and while 5%, it might sound small compared to some of the other things we've talked about, it's still a lot of preventable deaths. And for people who don't smoke, exercise, it's one of the biggest things you can do to lower your risk.
So it's not just about, managing weight, it's about the exercise itself. It seems to protect you from certain cancers.
Yeah, yeah, they're still figuring out exactly how it works, but it seems like exercise, it triggers all these beneficial changes in your body, changes that help fight cancer.
Let's move on to alcohol. The book talks about how drinking too much, that increases the risk of cancers of the esophagus, liver, rectum, and breast. And it even gives a specific number. It says your overall risk of cancer, it goes up by 6% for every 10 grams of alcohol you drink per day. 10 grams, that's about one standard drink. It can add up fast.
Yeah. Yeah, and link between alcohol and cancer, it's very clear. The book, it recommends moderation, don't overdo it.
Worldwide, it estimates that somewhere between 3.6% and 10% of all cancers are because of people drinking too much. That's a global problem.
It is, yeah. And the range, that just shows you that it can vary a lot depending on, where you live, what people's drinking habits are. But the bottom line is limiting your alcohol intake, that's a way to protect yourself.
The book then talks about sun exposure, ultraviolet radiation. It says that skin cancer is incredibly common in the U.S., over 1 million new cases every year. And it distinguishes between the types of skin cancer, the basal cell and squamous cell carcinomas, those are mostly curable. But then there's malignant melanoma, that's the serious one, and it still kills thousands of people each year.
Yeah, skin cancer, it's something we need to take seriously. And while most types are treatable, melanoma, that's the one you don't want to mess with. The book, it really stresses sun safety.
It says that the sun, that's the main cause of both melanoma and non-melanoma skin cancers. The UV radiation, it damages your skin cells, it can weaken your immune system, and the amount of sun you get over your lifetime, That's directly related to your risk of developing these cancers.
It's a cumulative effect. So it's important to protect yourself, throughout your life, even when you're young.
The book gives this scary statistic. It says that young men who use tanning beds, their risk of melanoma, it goes up by 75%. That's a huge increase. Tanning beds, they're just not worth it.
Yeah, that's a big red flag. The book, it makes it very clear. Tanning beds, avoid them.
So what can you do? The book suggests simple things. Limiting your time in the sun, using sunscreen, wearing a hat, sunglasses that block UV rays, even protective clothing.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all practical steps you can take, easy to do, and they can make a big difference.
The book also talks about occupational exposures. It says that at least 3% to 6% of cancers worldwide, those are because of things people are exposed to at work. It highlights how, reducing exposure to things like asbestos, that's been a big public health success.
It shows you that, when we take action, when we have regulations, we can actually prevent cancer.
The book talks about mesothelioma. That's a type of cancer caused by asbestos. It says the rates have gone down because we're using less asbestos. But it also says that, there are still everyday things that can be harmful. Things like gasoline fumes, welding fumes, wood dust, things that a lot of people are exposed to. It's about being aware of what's in your work environment.
Yeah, and taking precautions. If your employer recommends certain safety measures, follow them. Don't take any chances.
Now let's talk about screening, early intervention. The book emphasizes that, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. You really need to talk to your doctor, figure out what's best for you, what your risk factors are.
Absolutely. Your doctor, they can personalize those recommendations. It's not just about, following general guidelines.
The book does give some basic guidelines, though. For lung cancer, it says if you've been a heavy smoker, at least a pack a day for 30 years, and you're between 55 and 80, you should get a low-dose CT scan every now and then.
Yeah, those scans, they can help catch lung cancer early. And early detection, that's key for successful treatment.
For colon cancer, the book recommends a colonoscopy every 10 years, starting at age 50. If you're at higher risk, maybe because of family history, then you might need to get screened more often.
Colonoscopy, it's not the most fun thing in the world, but it's really effective. It can even prevent colon cancer because they can find and remove precancerous polyps. So it's definitely worth it.
For prostate cancer, the book talks about the PSA test. It says you should get that every other year between ages 50 and 75. If you're at higher risk, again, you might need to get it more often or start earlier. But it also says that PSA screening, it's a bit controversial. Some doctors, they have different opinions on it. So it's definitely something to talk to your doctor about.
Yeah, the PSA test, it's just one tool. And your doctor, they can help you weigh the pros and cons based on your situation.
Now, for testicular cancer, which we'll talk about in a bit, the book recommends self-exams once a month, checking for any lumps. It says guys between 15 and 45, they should definitely be doing this, but it can happen even later too. So it's something you could do yourself at home.
Self-exams, they're so important. You get to know your body and you can catch things early.
And for skin cancer, the book just says, check your skin regularly. Look for any changes, any new spots, any sores that aren't healing. And if you see anything that looks suspicious, go to your doctor right away.
Regular skin checks, they're essential, especially if you're at higher risk.
The book talks about genetic screening. It says that, we're going to see more and more of this in the future. Using tests to figure out what your risk is for different cancers and other diseases. It's a field that's really changing fast.
Yeah, genetic testing, it's becoming more common, more accessible, and it can give you a lot of information about your personal risk factors.
Yeah. It talks about BRCA1 and BRCA2 mutations. Those are, genetic syndromes that can increase your risk of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, pancreas cancer, prostate cancer. It said if you have a strong family history of any of those cancers, you should talk to your doctor, maybe even a genetic counselor.
Yeah, the genetic counselor, they can really help you understand what your risk is and whether you should get tested or not.
It also mentions Lynch syndrome. It's a hereditary condition that increases your risk of colon cancer, endometrial cancer, and others. It says it affects up to 1 in 300 people. That's a lot.
Lynch syndrome, it's relatively common, and it can really increase your lifetime risk. So it's important to know about it, especially if it runs in your family.
The book says that scientists, they're still discovering new genetic markers, things that might signal an increased risk of cancer. And there are already a bunch of tests you can get. But it also says that not all of these markers, they don't all mean that you're definitely going to get cancer. And some of them, we don't even know what they mean yet.
Yeah, it's important to remember that genetic testing, it's just a piece of the puzzle. It's not a crystal ball.
And here's something I thought was really interesting. The book says that, we have all this high-tech stuff now for detecting and treating cancer, but a lot of cancers, they're preventable with simple things.
Mm-hmm.
Things that don't cost a lot of money, things that aren't complicated.
Oh, right, right.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that, sometimes the most powerful solutions, they're the simplest ones.
It gives a whole list of general lifestyle recommendations: being active, maintaining a healthy weight, eating right, getting the HPV vaccine, not smoking, limiting alcohol, protecting yourself from STIs, minimizing sun exposure, getting screened. It's a lot, but it's all good advice.
It's like the foundation of a healthy life, right? And on all these things, they work together to lower your cancer risk.
The book then has this section called Prevention and Early Detection. And it starts by quoting the American Cancer Society. It says that about 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women will develop cancer at some point in their lives. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's sobering, isn't it? Cancer, it's more common than we'd like to think.
It says that over 700,000 men are diagnosed with cancer each year, and almost 300,000 die from it. And if you look at a man's entire lifetime, half of them, they'll get cancer at least once. Most cases, they happen after age 55.
And the thing is, the book points out that a lot of these cancers and a lot of these deaths, they're preventable.
That's right. It says that at least a third are because of smoking, and another third could be from a bad diet or not exercising enough. That's 2/3 that we could be doing something about.
It's about, taking control, making those lifestyle changes.
The book says that the 2 keys to beating cancer, those are, number 1, reducing your risk through prevention, and number 2, catching it early.
It's about, being proactive on 2 fronts.
So, under prevention, the book is very clear. Don't smoke. 90% of lung cancers, those are because of smoking. And it increases your risk for a lot of other cancers, too. So that's step 1. Quit smoking.
Yeah, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Smoking, it's just bad news.
It also says to limit your time in the sun to prevent skin cancer. Although, we do need some sun exposure for vitamin D. It says fair-skinned people and people who got a lot of sunburns when they were kids, they need to be extra careful.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance, getting enough sun for vitamin D, but also protecting yourself from those harmful rays.
It talks about diet again. Eat a healthy diet, low in fat, high in fiber, lots of fruits, vegetables, whole grains. It says high-fat, low-fiber diets, those are linked to colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer, and bladder cancer.
Eating right, it's so important, not just for preventing cancer, but for your overall health.
It says to avoid foods that are smoked, salted, pickled, or high in nitrates. Things like hot dogs and luncheon meats. Those might increase your risk of stomach cancer.
Yeah, processed foods, those are generally not good for you. It's better to stick to whole, natural foods.
It also says to be aware of your environment. Try to limit your exposure to certain chemicals like PVCs, tar, and creosote. Those have been linked to liver and skin cancers.
Yeah, it's about being informed, being aware of what's around you.
It also says to pay attention to your body. If you notice any changes, anything that seems off, go to the doctor. Don't wait.
Yeah, early detection, that's so important. Don't ignore those warning signs.
And of course, get screened. Get screened for colon cancer, bladder cancer, kidney cancer, testicular cancer, prostate cancer. The earlier you catch it, the better your chances of beating it.
Regular screenings, they're essential. They can literally save your life.
Now, under early detection, the book gives a whole list of symptoms, things that you should go to the doctor for. It says, these symptoms, they could be caused by other things too, but you should always get them checked out. So things like unexplained lumps, sores that don't heal, changes in moles, blood in your urine, stool, or saliva, a cough that doesn't go away, sore throat, back pain, unexplained weight loss, pain that just won't quit, pressure in your chest, unusual bleeding, nausea, fever. It's a long list, but it's good to be aware of these things.
Right. It's better to be safe than sorry. If you experience any of these things, don't just ignore them. Go to the doctor, get it checked out.
The book then talks about male breast cancer. It says a lot of people think that only women get breast cancer, but men can get it too. About 1% of all breast cancers, those are in men. And it even mentions Richard Roundtree, the actor who played Shaft. He was diagnosed with male breast cancer.
Yeah, it's important for men to know that they're not immune to this. Awareness is key.
The most common symptom, it says, is a lump under the nipple. You might also have some bloody discharge from the nipple, or the nipple might be retracted, meaning it turns inward. If you notice any of these things, the book says go to the doctor right away.
Early detection is just as important for men as it is for women.
And here's a really important point. The book says that a lot of men, they put off going to the doctor because they think, oh, real men don't get breast cancer. But that kind of thinking, it can be dangerous. It's so important to overcome any hesitation and just go get checked out.
Right, your health is more important than any outdated ideas about masculinity.
Finally, the book talks about testicular cancer. It says this is the most common cancer in young men between the ages of 15 and 35. And it can be aggressive, it can spread quickly, but the good news is if it's caught early, the cure rate is almost 100%. So early detection, that's absolutely crucial.
Yeah, testicular cancer, it's one of those cancers that can be really scary, but it's also very treatable, especially if you catch it early.
The book talks about some risk factors for testicular cancer. Having an undescended testicle, even if it was corrected with surgery, having a family history of testicular cancer, and being Caucasian.
So if you fall into any of those categories, it's even more important to be vigilant to do those self-exams.
In the book, it gives you step-by-step instructions on how to do a testicular self-exam. It says to do it once a month, starting at age 15. The best time is after a warm shower or bath when the skin is relaxed. Use some soap to help your fingers glide. Gently roll each testicle between your thumb and fingers. Feel for any lumps. It says it's normal for one testicle to be slightly larger than the other.
Yeah, the point is to get to know what feels normal for you. So if there's any change, you'll notice it.
You're looking for hard lumps about the size of a pea, and they usually don't hurt. The book says to ignore the epididymis. That's a cord-like structure on the back of each testicle. That's normal. That's not a lump. And if you find anything that feels suspicious, or if you have any pain, any heaviness, go see a doctor right away.
Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Early detection is key.
The book wraps up with some key takeaways. It says at least half of all cancers, those are preventable with simple lifestyle changes. It stresses the importance of screening, getting those checkups, doing those self-exams. And it mentions genetic testing, how that can help identify, if you're at higher risk for certain cancers.
It's a good summary of the most important points, things you can do to protect yourself.
The book also has some resources you can check out if you want to learn more. Dr. Bash, he has a page on the UNC School of Medicine website, and there's the American Cancer Society website, cancer.org. Lots of good information there.
Yeah, it's great that the book provides those resources. It gives you a starting point, for further exploration.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. Chapter 7 of the 21st Century Man is packed with vital information, things every man should know. We've talked about the things you can do to prevent cancer, the importance of screenings, of being aware of your body. It's empowering, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It gives you the tools to take control of your health.
And it reminds you that, small changes, those can make a big difference.
So, we've really just scratched the surface here. This chapter is packed with information. I highly encourage everyone to read it in its entirety, as well as the rest of the book, The 21st Century Man.
Absolutely.
It's an invaluable resource for men's health.
It is.
So think about those low-tech, low-cost interventions that the book talked about. What small change can you make today to reduce your risk of cancer?
It's all about those little steps, those daily choices that add up over time.
That's right. And we'll be back next time to delve into Chapter 8, Decoding Your Cancer Genes.
It's going to be a fascinating one.
Until then, take care of yourselves.
And be well.